for everyone who is filing in. We're getting started in a few minutes here at the top of the hour. Me and Kathy are just hanging out. We are talking about this being one of probably the craziest weeks ever in artificial intelligence news. And that was kind of led, like we were talking about, by GPT-4. And so, Kathy, I was talking to you about how much crazy advanced GPT-4 really seems to be from at least my past experiments with the models that used to underlie ChatGPT. It's just wild.
I can't wait to dive in. 2 webinars in 2 days has slowed down my ChatGPT or usage, but I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. I mean, they've got everything from advanced reasoning capabilities. You can drop in way more content to summarize. It just really does seem night and day. I mean, it's still obviously got lots of limitations and issues people are kind of rightly pointing out, but I was pretty impressed. And, I'll be really interested to see. It's not available yet, but one big piece of it is that you can actually drop in images and it can understand them. So in the demo, one of the people at OpenAI actually dropped in like a hand-drawn sketch of a web page. And it was like my joke web page, list out jokes. Here's what I think it should look like. It's a really crude drawing. And ChatGPT, or GPT-4 rather, was able to understand the image and write code to build this very simple web page.
That's incredible.
It's going to be a very, very exciting and strange year, I think, in AI.
And I do wonder, is that usable? We just talked the other day about copyright and all of that. It'll be interesting to see how it all rolls out.
Yeah, especially with stuff like that. I mean, it'll be very fascinating to see what legislation, regulations, or lack thereof start around this stuff. It's a wild world.
It is. For those of us just joining, we're going to start in about 2 minutes. My name is Kathy McPhillips. This is Mike Kaput. Let us know in the comments. Hi, Allison. Let us know in the comments where you're joining us from, and we'll get started soon. So we're just talking about all the crazy week in AI news that we've been dealing with. I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but Mike and Paul do the podcast every Tuesday morning. It goes live at 7 a.m. Eastern. And this week was a hot episode.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what the final numbers are on it, but we've had just a really passionate audience really show up to support the podcast, and we've been
great,
rising through the ranks. So that's been really fun to see.
Well, speaking of support, we have people from Ireland, Tennessee, India, Boston, New York, a few Ireland. Mr. Schoonhoven, nice to see you. British Columbia, Pasadena, Chicago, Mexico, Ohio. So it's a nice group, and people are still coming in and joining us. Thank you. So this is exciting. I'm looking forward to this today. I think this is a very applicable and understandable use of AI.
Yeah, this is definitely one that has a lot of wide-ranging capabilities and possibilities. And I think everyone in some way or another is kind of trying to figure out better personalization. So I'm really excited for what people are going to get out of it.
And I think as consumers, we're excited for brands to learn how to do personalization.
As someone who gets several emails a week from people that I've already bought the thing they're advertising to me, I think we can all get a little better at it.
All right. We just got a question if this will be recorded and sent out, and tomorrow morning you will receive the presentation and the recording to the video, and you'll also receive the blueprint ungated. So you'll look for that tomorrow morning, and we'll go into that more in a few minutes. So I think we can get started.
All right.
So I said this before, but I'll say it again. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kathy McPhillips. I head up growth here at the Institute, and this is Mike Kaput. He is our Chief Content Officer who heads up content, editorial, audience development for the Institute. And this is our second webinar in our Blueprint series. And personalization, like I said, is very, very, consumers are starting to expect it and demand it. Mike is the author of the Blueprint and our latest ebook, and it's sponsored by our friends at AWS, which you'll receive this ebook afterwards. Our goal here today is to walk through some highlights of the blueprint to give you a better understanding of AI and personalization. It's so great to see so many familiar names here and lots of new names, so thank you. And so Mike's presenting for about 45-ish minutes. I'm going to throw in some questions during it when we can, and let's get started. So before I get started, there are many, many new faces here. So Mike's going to go into a few slides some of you might have seen before, but we'll go through those quickly and then we'll jump into the blueprint. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. And thanks everyone for taking the time to spend an hour with us today. This is a really exciting topic, and in collaboration with AWS, one of the honestly best providers and companies out there possible for personalization, especially AI for personalization. We're super excited to show some highlights from the blueprint, which Kathy mentioned you'll also be receiving as part of your registration. So let's dive in. Before we get into talking through, use cases for AI and personalization, how you can use it in your business or industry, and what tools you might want to take a look at, I want to take a few minutes to discuss your AI opportunity. Why does this matter? Why does it matter now? And what is AI exactly, and how can it help you? So, it's never been more important for us as brands and as businesses to master this art and science of personalization. According to Gartner, a full 86% of B2B consumers expect you to understand their personal preferences, and 71% of B2C consumers expect the same thing. Not to mention, they don't just expect you to understand them, they expect you to actually act on that and deliver highly personalized experiences. They reward the brands that do, and they punish the brands that don't by moving to a competitor or having negative feelings about the products or services being offered by those companies. Now, there's just one very big problem. Of the companies actually doing personalization, and not everyone is, many, if not most, still personalize based on what we would call simple, predefined rules. So basically saying, if you are consumer X, you're going to see product or piece of content Y. It's very straightforward and very simplistic. Now, these predefined static rules actually used to work pretty well back in the early days of the internet and digital experiences, because back then you just didn't have that much user data to work with. You could maybe tell when someone clicked or visited or bought, and that was about it. Limited data meant limited personalization options. So back then, limited rules weren't that much of a problem. Now, as I'm sure you can guess today, that really couldn't be further from the truth. We have a flood of data on users from a huge number of sources. Consumer interactions take place across more touch points than ever. And we have so many different ways to personalize content and products and items and catalog items based on this data. What this means is that these predefined rules we used to be using, and that many still are just really, really inadequate for the modern needs of the consumers demanding modern personalization. So the reason this is because predefined rules have a few really fatal flaws. So first up, they're static. They just don't respond to new data. They don't adapt to evolving consumer needs and behaviors. If your customers change, the rules don't. They also can't really get this full value out of your data. It's really hard to create new rules every time you get new data sources or new insights. Very few teams, I would argue maybe none of them indefinitely, have the bandwidth to create predefined rules and manage them to improve personalization every time you add a new system or learn more about customers. And as a result, these predefined rules just don't scale.
Mike, could you give an example of something we might be doing that is going by predefined rules that isn't updating as our new data is coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we do this all the time. I mean, this is very, very common. For instance, in a very rules-based static email campaign, we are sending based on if-then rules. We say if consumer A is on a certain list or has a certain characteristic, then send them a certain email message. Now, that rule is fine if on that day the consumer meets that criteria, but as we all know, that behavior changes in near real time. The moment something changes with that consumer, our rule is immediately out of date and it doesn't get updated unless we update it. So all of these flaws are really the top reason brands are turning to artificial intelligence for personalization. And the reason is because AI works in a fundamentally different way than the predefined rules we just talked about. Instead of giving predefined instructions and if-then rules to an artificial intelligence system, instead you're specifying personalization goals. Then artificial intelligence is actually able to figure out which rules, which pathways to follow to achieve that goal. So you can use AI to do things like automatically personalize content and products. You can use massive amounts of data in real time to provide different recommendations because you're not the one who is telling the machine exactly how to do it. And you can actually scale personalization since it doesn't rely on all this manual predefined rules and the maintenance of them. So in fact, today, AI can actually segment users based on different dynamic behaviors and interactions. It can deliver extremely personalized digital experiences that are tailored exactly, almost at the individual level in some cases, and ultimately increases customer engagement and satisfaction by providing much more intelligent recommendations for content, products, services, and items, which ultimately increases revenue. Now, on that point of revenue, according to McKinsey, organizations that implement really effective personalization, on average, are seeing a 10 to 15% increase in revenue. And if you're talking about a direct-to-consumer business, you actually are looking at an even higher average lift. That's about 25% increase in revenue for those types of businesses. So long story short, it's really important to get personalization right if you can. And the way to get it right today is to do it with artificial intelligence. Now, before we dive into exactly how to do that, let's define really quick what AI is and kind of get a really foundational understanding of the technology. We're not going to get too technical or dive into a ton of jargon here. We're going to give you a really good working definition of AI so you can start understanding how better to apply it in your own business. So one of the definitions that we like the most when it comes to artificial intelligence, we like because it's simple. It comes from Demis Hassabis, who co-founded DeepMind, which is one of the major AI players out there. And he says that AI is the science of making machines smart. So what does being smart actually mean? So we would say AI is smart because of what I mentioned before, because it can determine its own pathways and its own rules to achieving an overall goal. Now, that's really impressive on its own, but there's another piece of this that really matters, the kind of secret sauce behind artificial intelligence. As it pursues those goals, as it pursues your personalization goals, it actually learns each time and improves each time. So if you're optimizing towards personalization goals like trying to increase overall engagement, or increase average order values, or boost time spent on page, or any other of the hundreds of possible personalization goals you have out there, every time you use AI for those goals, it's going to learn better about how to achieve them the next time. So this creates a really positive flywheel effect. The more you use AI and the more data you get on customer preferences, the better it's going to be able to personalize content. So here's a really quick example of what this means. Let's say you have a new user who consumes streaming content across all different devices. Over time, AI could actually learn that this user likes watching TV on mobile devices, but when they're at home, they watch full movies. Now, you didn't tell it that the user did that. It discovered that on its own as it was trying to optimize for increasing engagement with your streaming content. So an artificial intelligence recommendation engine could then automatically adjust recommendations for different types of content based on contextual factors. Like it would know when your user is actually at home using a certain device and tailor its recommendations based on that information. So it's important to know that AI is really an umbrella term. It's a category, not a single tool. It's this broad suite of techniques that leverage smart machines in very different ways. Everything I talked about with artificial intelligence learning on its own and optimizing and improving on its own, that's because of something called machine learning. So machine learning is the primary subset of artificial intelligence. It's kind of how it works, its magic. There are a couple steps that we use to make machines smart. So first, humans have to train the machine. We show the machine data, it learns how to recognize patterns, and then using those patterns, it learns how to better achieve goals. Now, once a model or a machine is fully trained, it can then go recognize those patterns and achieve those goals kind of out in the wild, so to speak. So it can then train itself on what it learns rather than a human having to intervene every time and say, no, that's a new example, a new case, a new use case. Here's actually the right answer. In many cases, artificial intelligence, once it has been adequately trained, can learn on its own very fast and at scale. Now, another important term to note here is deep learning. You don't have to get into all the nuances of what every single term means and all the technicalities. If you want to go learn on your own, that's great. Really, you just need to understand that deep learning is a highly advanced subset of machine learning. And this is how we get machines to be much like us as humans. So being able to be human-like by learning how to see, speak, hear, and understand like human beings do.
And Mike, I think something to bring up here is, we talk a lot about you don't need to be a data scientist to really understand how to use these tools, but it does make sense, and you'll touch on this later, is like when you're looking at your MarTech stack and onboarding new technology or looking at new technology, it's really important to understand why the AI is so critical. And like asking these tools, can you do this?
Absolutely. And that's why we kind of go into this foundational bit here is not because you need to kind of, there's not going to be a test later. It's more so you have a framework to understand when you're looking at your own business and your own use cases, oh, here's why AI is different. And here's the areas where it could be applied. So that's kind of the last bit here is that all you really need to know is that when it comes to AI for personalization, there's 4 core applications that really a lot of these tools and use cases fall into. So the first is language. Language AI is basically AI that can understand and generate written language. And so language AI terms you might see out in the wild. Again, you don't have to know what every single one of these means. It's just to kind of familiarize yourself with them. Might be natural language generation, natural language processing, sentiment analysis, etc. So you can see here an example of language AI in your everyday life. I mean, you've probably seen Smart Compose in Gmail. You type an email and Gmail understands what you're typing and predicts what is likely to be the next sentence or phrase that makes the most sense. The second of the 4 core applications is vision AI. So this is when machines can analyze and understand data from images and video. So we're basically trying to recreate here how humans visualize and process visual data in the world. So you may hear terms here like object recognition, image generation, and video generation. Any AI that can actually create images or video is within this vision AI category. And you can see here one of the examples you use every day of vision AI, which is facial recognition on your phone. Your phone recognizes your face and unlocks it for you. The third out of the 4 types is speech AI. So this is when AI can actually recognize, process, and emulate human voices and speech. So things like voice recognition, speech-to-speech translation. You can see here an example of speech AI, any type of transcription software that you use where it'll actually identify what language is being spoken in a video, what words are being said, and then translate those into text or into other types of speech. Last but not least, vertical focused AI is the fourth core application of personalization AI. So this is when we have artificial intelligence perform these really advanced predictive functions for specific use cases, industries, or verticals. So you may hear terms here like forecasting, pattern recognition, anomaly detection, industry specific in, say, financial services might be fraud detection. These are all examples of vertical focused AI. So honestly, that's really all you need to know to begin understanding how to find different use cases for artificial intelligence in personalization. So the really good news here is that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to find AI use cases. And you don't actually have to personalize everything that you're doing all at once. We don't have to go from 0 to 100. We can actually just find really tangible use cases for how AI can help us improve personalization. And so the way we do that is that we look at what we're doing regarding personalization, or what we'd like to do in any given day, week, month, quarter, year, what have you. We also look at what business objectives we're trying to accomplish over these timeframes. And so as we think about that list of activities, as you are thinking about everything your team and you are doing in a day, you want to ask yourself 3 questions. Is it data-driven? Does it use data? Could it use data? Do you have data that might apply to accomplishing the task? Is it repetitive? Is it using the same types of steps, the same steps over and over again to achieve the goal or achieve the business outcome? And is it making a prediction? I guarantee you when it comes to personalization, you are making a prediction. Personalization relies on predictions to figure out what recommendations and what segmentations users need and belong in. Now, for these questions, as you're asking them of any given task that you do, you don't need to answer yes to all 3 of them to have a use case for artificial intelligence. Even if you answer yes to 1 or 2 of them for any given activity, you're probably looking at a decent use case for AI. AI can probably help make that thing more efficient, more automated, or better at achieving outcomes. So to give you some more tangible ideas here, let's look at some common use cases for AI in personalization. Now, all of these listed here are use cases that are possible today and that brands are already using to achieve much more sophisticated types of personalization. So think about things like personalizing homepages. You can literally personalize pages to match content, services, promotions, images, artwork, and results on each page to a user's preferences and behaviors. Obviously, we can match product recommendations, much like Amazon does. We can personalize recommendations based on our business goals. We can personalize marketing assets, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides here. We can make product discovery more intelligent based on what you've bought in the past or what others like you have bought. We can even recommend new items or items that are trending, and we can personalize the very product descriptions and reviews that you see based on what you're doing at any given time and based on your past preferences and behavior. So to give you even more ideas and inspiration, I want to run through a few use cases by industry. I'm not going to read through all of these. You can find an even more exhaustive list in the blueprint you'll be receiving, but these are just some of the interesting ways, regardless of, in different industries, you can start using AI to better personalize experiences. So in retail, for instance, you can increase average order size by recommending products that go along with what's already in a cart. In financial services, you can automatically categorize transactions so you give users the right products. In professional services, you can actually tailor content recommendations to individual clients or users based on their past behavior or what industry they're in. In manufacturing, there's lots of really interesting ways to use AI for personalization. You could actually personalize how users experience a website depending on what product line they're a customer of. There's so many ways with this wealth of user data that we have to actually customize experiences so it's not a one-size-fits-all experience for every single consumer.
So Mike, is it, are CRMs getting more intelligent, or is a lot of this going through APIs and integrations?
So a lot of the personalization tools that we are talking about, especially some of AWS's tools, definitely use APIs, but that makes it really easy to integrate with a lot of different systems. CRMs themselves, I mean, we've seen some really recent advancements, not exactly yet just there yet with personalization, but the HubSpots and the Salesforces of the world are integrating more AI features that make it easier to at least understand your data for personalization purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to somewhere, industry like healthcare, there's a wealth of opportunities here where we can personalize, say, provider communications based on your preferences. In travel and hospitality, we can serve the most relevant photos or reviews to increase, for instance, like hotel bookings. We can actually even recommend experiences based on what activities you like to do, what destination you're going to. There's so many possibilities here. And then finally, in software, internet, and SaaS, so many ways we can actually use personalization powered by AI to increase subscriber rates, reduce churn, and actually capitalize on time-sensitive promotions to increase our user bases. So before we start looking at different tools for personalization, I want to do a quick call out of something called pre-built recommenders. So solutions like Amazon Personalize, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second here, actually offer what's called pre-built recommenders in certain industries. So what these do is these make your work way easier. They're basically pre-made personalization recipes that you can really easily launch. So for instance, in certain industries, you simply select a recommender for a certain use case, and something like Amazon Personalize does the heavy lifting to use AI to actually generate really, really robust recommendations. So Amazon Personalize specifically offers these pre-built recommenders for both retail and media and entertainment. So here's an example of like what that looks like. In retail, you could actually just select from a pre-built recommender option like show customers the most viewed products, the best sellers, or the ones that are frequently bought together. In media and entertainment, you could also select from pre-built ones like show people the most popular content, show people content that's more like whatever they just watched, or show them what's trending now. So these make it really, really easy to get up and running really fast. So not every solution out there will have pre-built recommenders like this, but I think it's really important if you are exploring vendors and options that you keep in mind the benefits of solutions that do have these. It just really cuts down the time it takes you to spin up really, really useful recommendations.
I think it also helps you decide what outcomes you're looking for. If you don't know when you're trying to map that out, go with a pre-built solution that's going to help you, and then you can kind of fine tune it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every business is different, but there is a danger that if you spend too much time kind of over engineering something, the time, money, and resources it takes to spin something up just really leaves you quite behind. You want to be looking for how you can spin up recommendations in days, not months.
And you'd have to imagine companies like Amazon, with all the data they have, they know the questions most companies are asking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially too, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. I would highly recommend checking out Amazon Personalize and the web resources they have, because they have so many different use cases at this point, given that they're one of the top providers in the world, that there's a lot of options, regardless of your industry or use case. All right, so let's dive into a couple recommendations for tools that you might want to consider as you're kind of looking into and formulating your use cases for personalization AI. So like I mentioned, first up is Amazon Personalize from AWS. With them, you can very quickly implement a customized personalization engine in days, not months, and you can use all sorts of really, really sophisticated personalization features to recommend things like pages, items, products, recommend based on contextual factors, recommend fresh items, products, or content using metadata. So if you don't have a lot of historical data about a certain product or content, you can actually use the metadata you provide for that to recommend it, even if you don't have that historical information. You can personalize basically every touch point in the customer journey, and in some cases, actually get down to one-to-one targeting using Personalize. Now, what is really helpful here to understand is that one of the benefits of AWS and their solutions is they are literally using the exact same machine learning that Amazon.com has used for over 20 years. So you're literally getting product, item recommendations, content recommendations that have been used and tested over decades by one of the top retailers in the world. I also want to mention Amazon SageMaker. So this is going to be perhaps if you are interested in creating your own machine learning models. So Amazon SageMaker provides you with all the tools you would need to actually create these models in one place. It's a fully managed service. You're going to help your data scientists, your machine learning practitioners actually build their own models, train them, and deploy them really, really quickly. So it has a ton of different features and capabilities that help you do that. So using SageMaker, you can do things like access, label, and process a ton of data, all the structured data and unstructured data that's required for that first step I mentioned in machine learning, which is training the machine. You have features that reduce the training time. I mean, these models do require time to train. If you're deploying models, reducing that time from hours to minutes is incredible when it comes to cost savings and time to market. And you can automate and standardize a lot of practices and processes to make the machine learning and data science talent you have in-house much more efficient. Another really interesting solution to check out is something called Mutiny. This is a no-code AI solution. So we're talking about the ability to personalize a website just by pointing and clicking. There's no code needed at all, no coding of any type. So basically you can run experiments to personalize things really fast without hiring a bunch of developers. You can actually see here in this screenshot, one of their customers personalized a landing page based on which persona you were very quickly, just clicking and pointing with no code. So seed stage investors and startups would actually see one homepage, whereas another type of persona like growth stage companies would see totally different messaging, features, and benefits based on their particular needs. Persado is another one that we love. So Persado is an AI platform that actually automatically personalizes each and every message that you send out, content, messaging, copy, to an individual user's preferences. So Persado's AI, it's a language AI that actually knows what type of words you prefer. And then it adjusts your content to make it as appealing as possible to that individual. And then it does this at scale across your entire audience. So you can see in this screenshot here, the brand had an ad that said, okay, for fall, select sweaters on sale, general ad copy. However, their consumer, Hannah, actually responds better, Persado found. Persado's AI analyzed Hannah's preferences and behaviors and understood that Hannah probably likes much more language around newness, achievement, excitement. And then it tailors this generic marketing message to Hannah's specific motivations and preferences.
So Mike, in something like Persado, do brands have a list of acceptable wording and content, and then the personalization is based on the conversions, engagement history? and then it stays up to date based on that current.
Yeah, so the way it works is that Persado has this kind of proprietary language model that they're applying to your specific marketing, copy, messaging, essentially training it on how you sound. And then there's also just a proprietary data set generically that says, okay, we've analyzed billions of data points about how consumers are motivated via language online. Those two capabilities are merged to give you what I just described.
Great.
And then last but not least, I want to mention rasa.io. This is specifically for email newsletters, but it is an incredible level of personalization. What Rasa will actually do for you is automatically create a personalized newsletter that is personalized at a one-to-one level to every single one of your subscribers. So what that means is that, let's say we're using rasa.io to send out an AI newsletter that goes out weekly. Over time, I get the newsletter and end up clicking and reading more content about AI startups. Kathy gets it and ends up clicking and reading and engaging with more content around AI ethics or responsible AI. Over time, Rasa will actually send myself and Kathy totally different newsletters, still related to AI news, that give us the content that we actually enjoy and engage with. And so as a result, you can skyrocket your open rates and your engagement rates and click rates on email newsletters.
And one thing to note about Rasa is this is a good example of you don't need data to get started. It helps you build the data.
Correct. So as long as you have a list that you can send to, over time, you'll be getting data from the list's behavior to actually create these personalized recommendations. So before we dive into questions here, I do want to leave you with some information on how you might want to think about assessing AI vendors. So we've gone through what is AI, why does this matter to you, how do you find your use cases in personalization, and some tools you might want to check out. So presumably you're going to very quickly start talking to vendors, looking at technology. Now, there are so many incredible vendors out there doing some of the coolest work I've ever seen in terms of technology. But unfortunately, in AI, there's also a lot of hype, there's a lot of buzz, and frankly, putting the letters AI in your company name or in your pitch deck just leads to more funding. So it's being misused sometimes. The simple truth is that not every single company that claims they have AI is actually using it or using it to the extent that they say they will. So you have to be really diligent about understanding what tools do in very simple terms, how the technology actually works, and how it's smarter than what you're doing now. Now, hopefully with some of the framework we've talked through today, you are better equipped to do that. But the problem is the person on the other end of the phone or the call or what have you might not be. So unfortunately as well, sometimes, not nearly all the time, but sometimes sales reps that work for AI vendors cannot tell you in plain terms the value of the tool or how it works. Now, this is often just not their fault. They just don't fundamentally understand AI at a foundational level. They've been briefed by engineers or executives, but you may actually have to dig a little deeper on some of these calls or demos to actually talk to the people at the company, the engineers, the product leaders, that can tell you how this stuff actually works and explain it in simple terms. Because one of the biggest mistakes you can make, and one of the things we try to help our audience with, is that if you don't understand it, you really don't want to buy it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to get a PhD in machine learning. It means you need to understand, how is this smarter than what you're doing today? So really that breaks down into two areas. How is this tool helping us save more time and money than we would before? So think of this as efficiency lift. Or how does this tool increase the probability that we achieve our business goals? How does it give us a performance lift? Now, an AI tool does not have to do both of these things to create immense value for you. If it just saves you time and money, that's awesome. But it needs to do one of the two or both if you really want to start doing things in a smarter way than you're doing them today. Otherwise, what is the point? We love AI as much as anybody, but really, if you're not getting more value out of an AI tool than your traditional technology, there's no point in you actually buying it. You also want to ask fundamental questions around what will the machine do and what will the marketer do. Now, no matter how advanced the AI is that we talk about, no matter what innovations happen in the next months and years, very rarely will you be in a situation where an AI tool sold by a vendor is going to do everything on its own. That doesn't really exist today. There's no magic button that you hit and AI suddenly produces every result for you. There's plenty of powerful AI tools out there that will do many things for you, but there's always going to be a human in the loop, a marketer in the loop. You want to understand what is the machine doing on its own, and what is your team actually going to have to do? What should it be doing to get value out of the technology? So as we wrap up here and head into some questions, I want to leave you with a few questions of your own to ask as you're going through the technology selection process. Now, you don't have to ask every single one of these questions, and I would say don't be too harsh with vendors. Not everyone's going to have an answer to every single one of these. These are more just frames of reference to start understanding all the pieces and nuances of the vendor, the technology, and the team required to get value out of it. So when it comes to vendors, you want to consider questions like, does the company have a public roadmap for its AI capabilities? Where is it going? This is especially helpful for your current tech providers. So we all rely on certain core platforms and systems that we're not getting rid of anytime soon, whether we want to or not. A lot of those core platforms are starting to integrate AI into their tools. So we talked about smart CRMs, for instance, before. A lot of CRM tools are starting to integrate robust AI features. It's really helpful, and probably one of the first places to start is to go to your current providers and say, do you have AI capabilities I can be using today? What does the roadmap look like? Is this going to get dramatically smarter for the use cases I need it to be smarter for in the near future? You may also want to ask what training and onboarding are provided. I mean, the simple fact is, with a lot of these tools, you will have to do some work, like with any technology, to get value out of them. You may also want to ask, how does a company help customers maintain security and compliance? Many people work in regulated industries or industries where we're very sensitive about the data we use and how we use it. Vendors should be able to help you answer that question. When you ask questions about the technology, again, just really simply understanding what it does. Don't be afraid to ask really simple, straightforward questions. How does the company actually use AI in its products? Ask for examples. What are the primary use cases for the company's AI solutions? You can literally tell them, here's my use case. What makes your tool smarter than what I'm doing today? Are there any minimum requirements to get value out of the technology? This is a really important one. Many solutions out there require a certain type or volume of data, a certain list size, certain number of emails sent, et cetera. That should be pretty apparent because they're not going to try to sell you this stuff if it won't even work for you. But you do want to be aware of all the limitations and requirements to get the maximum value out of the technology. Now, finally, you want to ask a few questions both of the vendor and of yourselves about your team. What kind of in-house capabilities do you need to actually get value out of an AI solution? Like we mentioned, it's not going to just work on its own. Your team is going to have to use it in a smarter way to get better value out of what you're doing today. What training is needed for our team? Does a vendor provide it? Now, this can go many directions. Some vendors don't really provide a ton of training. Some do. In either event, you just need to understand where you stand on this. Will we need additional outside support to use the technology? Are you going to adopt this and buy it and sign a contract and then suddenly realize you need to spend or invest far more to keep maintaining the technology? And then that question about what regular tasks are we going to be required to complete? I mean, some of these, even once you get onboarded, like other tools, you're still going to have to allocate time and money and energy every week or month or quarter to making sure you continue to get value out of the tools. So before we dive into questions, two more quick things I want to cover. First, we talked a bit about Amazon Personalize. I wanted to really encourage you, if these use cases are resonating with you, if this appears to be a better way to personalize your content, your marketing, your products, and your entire business, you want to look into their solutions at aws.amazon.com/personalize. Like I said, they're one of, if not the leader in space, extremely easy to use and extremely powerful. So please reach out to them if you have questions about that solution and to see if it's a fit for you.
And I'd also say to that, I think, just because it's Amazon doesn't mean that you can't afford it, that it's worth it to check out, can my small business do this? Can my B2B service do this, and see what they can do for you? So I think it's more than, don't let the word Amazon scare you away if you think it's too big.
And finally, if you're interested in how AI can supercharge personalization, you haven't seen anything yet, because personalization is just one of hundreds of use cases for artificial intelligence in marketing, sales, and business. The best way, the easiest way, and the fastest way to get up to speed on this stuff and start piloting your own AI projects and applying AI to your business is to join us at our Marketing AI Conference this year, July 26th to the 28th in Cleveland, Ohio, our home base. Check out maicon.ai for details there. This is probably just the best and leading industry conference on how to actually apply artificial intelligence in marketing, sales, and business. Every year, we bring together hundreds of practitioners who are all sharing knowledge, case studies, and advice. And we bring together one of the top lineups of experts and speakers when it comes to actual real-world applications of AI anywhere in the world. So we hope you'll join us. All right.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
And the most fun.
It is the most fun. We can objectively say that. So I am going to stop sharing my screen so we can jump back on video here, me and Kathy, and we're going to jump into some Q&A and discussion. Now, like we mentioned before we get into this, you're going to receive a recording of the webinar. You're going to receive a copy of the blueprint, which has far more content, far more advice than I've covered here today. So please keep an eye out for those. Also, we'll try to get to every question we can, but if we don't, or if there are very specific ones that we'll have the AWS team chime in on later, we'll send those their way.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Thank you, Mike. That was just so in-depth. And one thing that you didn't go over this in the blueprint are 3 really, really solid examples of personalization using AI, using Amazon's technology. That, one was a sports team.
Yes.
We think about how we use it in our own lives. Like Amazon knows so much about me. Their personalization engine is like spot on. Spotify, I've found so much new music through Spotify because my content's all personalized. So it would just be great to have that in all the things that we're doing,
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend people, for many reasons, check out the full blueprint, because we do have some really cool case studies in there. With one of the European soccer leagues, did some stunning personalization stuff using Amazon Personalize, and a couple of other businesses saw just like, we've been in this business a while, and just like some of the most jaw-dropping results that I've ever seen come from an application of artificial intelligence.
Yep. Okay. So proprietary data, regulated industries, HIPAA, FinServ, things like that. Like, how can you do personalization while still protecting our data and our customers?
So I think that's probably the number one question on everyone's minds when it comes to those industries. The bad news is there's a lot of nuance and complexity to it, and not every vendor or solution is going to be equipped to honor those concerns, which obviously means you probably won't work with them. But the good news is there are solutions that are being custom built and exist to address those concerns. So, leading AI vendors, again, Amazon being one of them, they have plenty of like healthcare, insurance, things like that, case studies. They've been working in these industries for decades at this point. So when it comes to those industries, I really would encourage you, look at some of the more established leaders, because I'm not knocking at all the wonderful AI startups out there, but the simple fact is the market is so cutthroat competitive that some startups, vendors may cut corners when it comes to those things. So you really do want to ask questions, because I realize that that's not great behavior, but it may happen if a new company or someone, say, like we talked about, say a salesperson who's not as knowledgeable about these concerns, if they might tell you something or do something that isn't exactly aligned with your regulatory or privacy concerns.
So, I mean, we do that a lot, just with any tech that we're doing, right? Doing our due diligence, asking all the right questions, asking how they're using the data. Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's kind of those are the kind of the base level questions you want to start asking, right? Is obviously where is your business getting the data? I assume you're following all your regulations, which is great. You want to just point blank ask, what are your processes and how do you handle HIPAA? How do you handle financial regulatory data? How do you adhere to A, B, and C guidelines? Ask them point blank and require a very concrete and cohesive answer. And then I would also look for proof, right? You want to ask, who else have you worked with that had these concerns, that has done this stuff? Can you show me concrete examples? Because if there aren't any, you're probably not talking to the right person.
Right. Let's see. Have we used AI at all on this webinar?
On this webinar? No. We like to keep these highly human and personalized, I would say. You certainly could. Keep in mind, to produce the video, to do transcription, if we're summarizing certain points for ourselves, we do absolutely use artificial intelligence there. I would say to formulate these and, to create the blueprints and everything, we want to be sure they're extremely human, custom, highly valuable, as we know our audience so well, that we don't for those. Now, that's not to say we don't use AI for certain other types of content, maybe, but nope, not for this. It's 100% people.
Okay. And I think you addressed this with the Rasa when we were on Rasa, but do you have to have your own data for personalization with Persado, Mutiny, or Rasa, which does not require your own data?
So Mutiny, don't quote me on it. You'd have to check, but given that it's no code, it's more making it easier for you to run your own experiments and then learn from those. Because if you're running, think about it as just like multivariate testing at scale, right? You can really quickly spin up different pages. And then as people come to your website, you're getting your own data to learn from that. But do double check with them. Rasa, you don't. Persado is trained, at least in part, on your data. I think they are in the process of releasing a more generic version of the tool. It's like a freemium version for smaller businesses that's trained on kind of a common data set, so to speak. So you wouldn't need your own data. But for the more enterprise features, you're going to be training it on your own data.
Sorry, I muted while I was typing. How do you marry personalization and brand positioning? Doesn't one jeopardize the other a bit? How can you train it to stay within brand boundaries?
That's a really good question. So this kind of goes back to, in a weird way, the regulatory stuff. Not everyone out there is thinking about this. Many of the vendors out there, the providers and solutions out there, have not asked this question. So I'm sure they get it. I don't think they have a solution for it because, if you're personalizing every single line to a single person, your positioning is totally shot. However, some of the top solutions, one that comes to mind for at least content generation is a company called writer.com, is actually creating content that has been trained specifically on you, on your positioning, your branding, your guidelines. And it's not doing that in a vacuum without your input. You're actually helping make sure that the models being used that are spinning out messaging, adhere to your positioning, adhere to your tone, style, and your guidelines. So when it comes to positioning, like with regulatory, you want to ask specifically, how do you preserve our brand positioning while still increasing personalization? And the best vendors out there, again, like the writers of the world, they literally, you'll see that immediately on their website. We're going to increasingly move into a world, I think, where some of the more generic solutions will find it hard to compete, because like a writer is out there building custom models and personalizations based on you, not someone else.
And the thing I liked about Writer, and again, there's many, many tools that we've looked at and use, is that you could write an article through Writer. I could write an article through Writer. We sound like ourselves, but we are aligned with our brand positioning and with our language.
Right. That's exactly it.
Okay. What's the biggest mistake that marketers make when they first engage with AI?
How much time do we have?
7 minutes.
And keep in mind, we all make these mistakes.
Oh,
I'm
yes,
not judging. I'm
100%.
not judging anyone for making mistakes that I'm about to say, because I've made all of them myself. I think some of the presentation is structured to address some of those mistakes. So people sometimes think, oh, AI is very big, scary, sci-fi, too technical. I don't have the time, the energy, the ability to learn this stuff. And that's simply not true. That's the biggest misconception, is not getting started and not getting your hands dirty with some of these tools, because you think it's like coding and computer science, where it's like, okay, like I go learn on my own, but it's going to take a long time, or I need some formal training. You don't need that to go buy AI technology. You don't need that to apply AI to marketing. So that's the biggest misconception. And then once you get there, assuming it's magic. It's not. It's technology. It's smarter technology. Like we talked about, you really need to be smart about how you apply it, because there's no magic button. I mean, keep in mind, the GPT-4s of the world seem like magic. I'm with you. But there's still so many different considerations and concerns that you really need to be an educated buyer of AI technology.
I was going to say, I think the biggest mistake that I've seen with any tech actually is buying the tech because it's cool, it's in your budget, someone you know likes it, and not having a use case and an outcome that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Okay, here's a good one. It seems like consumers want personalization and they want privacy. What suggestions do you have for how to balance those, and how to make the case to the consumer to share their info and trust with us?
That's a really good question. I love that. I would say a couple of things here. One, we actually just talked about this recently on a podcast and published a post about it, is that I really think in this kind of coming age of hyper-personalization using AI, we're going to see some just breathtaking consumer experiences that are able to be personalized, because we just said we're giving up a lot of data. If you are very sensitive to that, there's nothing wrong with that. You just may not experience that level of personalization. Some people, we're on a spectrum, right? Where some people literally do not care, giving up every single bit of their personal data if it makes their lives easier, frictionless, and just more valuable when engaging with like consumer apps and tools. Other people are willing to forego some of those benefits in order to protect what they perceive as their privacy and their data. Now, I think as a brand, you really need to overinvest in trust, because every consumer thinks about this, and there's not going to be a one size fits all answer here, but really provide so much value that they're happy to give up their data to work with you. But also not just that, do everything you can across your messaging, your copy, your customer engagements, and your entire approach to both using AI and just marketing in general to create as much trust as possible. I would honestly very seriously consider public data privacy and AI ethics policies for every company out there. They don't have to be, they could be version 1s. They don't have to be the most extensive documents of all time, but tell people, here's how we use your data. Here's how we won't use it. Here's how we do use AI to personalize things. Here's what that means in plain language for you. Here's the benefits to you. And here's how we will never use it. There are a couple of leaders out there in the AI space that have published policies like these that literally say, we won't work with clients that are trying to do A, B, and C across different like personalizing messages for, shady purposes or political gain or whatever your brand wants to avoid or be aligned with. So I'd take pretty vocal public stance on how you will and won't use these tools and the data that fuels them.
And I think sometimes it's like flat out blatant, we're collecting this information because we want to give you A, B, and C. So thank you for, and if you don't want to fill it out, don't fill it out, but we want to make this better for you. So this is why we're asking.
Yeah. And it's also helpful to consider different options too, right? I mean, like our Writer Summit event that we're running next week, we have multiple sign-up options. It's a virtual event. You can sign up for free and your data is shared with sponsors. We're very clear about that. Or you can pay a nominal fee and, keep your data private. We just give people choice.
Exactly. Art is asking about AI vendors that base personalization on response to video content. Do you know any?
That is a good question. Vidyard, yeah, that's probably, you're a little more familiar with that than I am. I think that would be one that would jump to mind, Vidyard. We might let me check through some of the recent vendor spotlights we've had come in. We do these vendor spotlights that we solicit from people to just like share with our audience and share how people use AI. And we can follow up via email with a couple possible suggestions.
What about personalized landing pages? Or do you have any tools that could connect to your CRM or your website for landing pages?
So yeah, so one interesting platform here that a lot of people I think have heard of but didn't realize made such a really smart and intelligent evolution into AI is a company called Unbounce. So Unbounce has been around for a long time. They used to just be a static landing page builder. And I think they have a lot of clients or customers who know them as that company. But lately, through a series of acquisitions and hiring the right talent and really investing in innovation, they have created some really robust AI-powered landing page features that both, can help you create landing pages, but also personalize them. So I'd check them out.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour. So thank you, Mike. That was great. So everyone, we're going to send you the link to the recording, the link to the presentation, and the blueprint. You'll have that tomorrow morning at the latest, whenever we get that done today. And stay tuned for our next event. So thank you, Mike, so much for all the work you did for this.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you, everyone, for your time.